Well, hello everybody. I've decided I'd like to try my hand at English muffins again. It's been quite a few years since I've made my own English muffins. They're not that difficult, and of course the homemade ones taste a lot better than those store-bought things. I'll put the link to the recipe that I'm using below the video, as I usually do. But I'll run through the ingredients here now before I get started. It's a cup of milk, 2 tablespoons of white sugar, a 1/4 ounce package of active dry yeast. I'm not using active dry yeast. I'm using what they call an instant dry yeast, and that's what professional bakers use. It's readily available. I think I bought my last container of it on Amazon, but you can find it in most good grocery stores. The advantage being with the instant yeast, you don't have to proof it or soften it in some water and sugar and whatever. You just add it to the dry ingredients and it mixes right in. And after that, it's a cup of warm water, a 1/4 cup of melted shortening, and 6 cups of all-purpose flour, and 1 teaspoon of salt. So far I have half of the flour in there. There's 3 cups of all-purpose flour. And now I'm going to add the instant dry yeast. I'm using a tablespoon. It says an ounce. I'm assuming that somewhere is close. But if you can get a look at that, it's quite a fine powder compared to the kind that you buy that they just call active dry yeast. And I just want to mix that in with the flour a bit. Now what I'm going to add is the cup of milk, the cup of lukewarm water, and a 1/4 cup of vegetable shortening melted. I knew I had vegetable shortening in my refrigerator. I rarely ever use it, but I knew there was a package in there somewhere. So I checked to see what the sell-by date was on the thing. And it supposedly is fresh until this coming July. I don't know how many years that's been in my refrigerator, and it still says it's fresh. So we're going to use it anyway, I guess. The cup of milk, you don't boil it, but you heat it to where it starts to bubble just a little bit. And then you add the cup of lukewarm water and the cup of, a 1/4 cup or rather, of melted shortening. Of course, you can do this by hand, but have a stand mixer. Take the easy way out, is the way I look at it. And that will continue to mix for a few minutes until we have a really soft dough there. That is a very soft dough. And the purpose of doing this before you add the salt is to give the yeast a chance to get well mixed into the batter. Salt is a retardant. It slows down the development of the yeast. That's 1 teaspoon of salt, and what I used was a iodized sea salt. Not that it matters, you could use any salt, or kosher salt, or an iodized salt. Just so happens that the sea salt that I buy at Costco is iodized. Now you add the other 3 cups of flour. But I'm going to put them in one at a time, just in the event that I don't really need all 3. You never know. I'll bring you back once the dough is ready to be kneaded. If you can hear me above the racket, that's after adding about 2½ cups instead of the 3, and it's formed a nice ball. I'll let it knead for 5 minutes or so here. If it does get a little sticky in the process again, I'll add some more flour, but if I'd added all 3 cups of flour, it would have been way too much. You never know with these things. Bring you back once it's finished its kneading. Let it knead for 5 minutes, and I didn't have to add any additional flour, so I've used about 5.5 cups, I guess, altogether instead of the 6 cups. Now I'm just going to cover it over with some plastic wrap in the same bowl that I mixed it in, and let it rise or proof, or whatever you want to call it, for an hour or until it's double in bulk. Well, it hasn't taken the full hour. That instant yeast really works. It rose very quickly. And now, punch it down. Turn it out onto a floured surface. And then it gets rolled out to about a 1/2 inch thick. So I will just start the process here and bring you back and show you after I finished fighting with it and got it rolled out to roughly a 1/2 inch in thickness, I guess. It does seem to stretch quite nicely, like a good pizza dough, really. That wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be. I thought it'd be one of those doughs that would, fight back. It would try to shrink every time you cut it, but it didn't do that. I'm using a biscuit cutter, which is what they say to use. This particular one is 3 7/8 or 98 millimeters. You could use larger. I don't think there would be a larger one available, but you can use smaller if you like. It's supposed to have been rolled out to a 1/2 inch in thickness, and I don't know. Some of mine is probably a bit thinner than that, so we'll see what happens when I go to grill them. And they're going on a cookie sheet lined with parchment paper and sprinkled with cornmeal. And I'll bring you back when I have finished the cutting of the biscuits and show you how many I get. Well, I got a dozen, a little piece of dough left over. I like fried dough, so that'll be with my lunch today. You now dust the top of them with a little more cornmeal. This cornmeal prevents them from hopefully sticking to the parchment paper, but also the cornmeal on both surfaces when you're grilling them will help prevent them from sticking. Now it gets covered with a tea towel and allowed to rest and rise for 30 minutes. Bring you back when it's time to grill them. I meant to say something about the professional instant yeast that I buy. As I said, you can get it on Amazon. However, it's not available in those little packets like the yeast for home use comes in, the single dose packets. I think the smallest I have seen is roughly a pound or 500 grams, somewhere in that neighborhood. This is a food quality canister, and I purchased it from King Arthur Flour. They sell it for this purpose, to put your yeast in. And I put the full thing of yeast in there. That's practically a whole package of it. I haven't used a great deal since I bought the new package. And keep it in the freezer. It will keep for years, as long as you keep it in the freezer. And I mean literally years. Sometimes it takes me 2 or 3 years to use a container of it. So it doesn't go to waste, and unfortunately though, you do have to buy it in large quantities. Well, the instructions are to grill them on a griddle, a greased griddle, for 10 minutes each side at medium heat. Well, medium heat doesn't mean much. I guess all stoves are different. I'm using a large cast iron frying pan. Don't know what happened. I used to have a griddle. It was flat on one side and had those ridges on the other side. Don't have it anymore. I have no idea where it went. Probably loaned it to somebody, never got it back. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. Anyway, I just brushed it with some of the same vegetable shortening that I used in the recipe. And I'm trying to select 4 muffins that are roughly the same thickness, since I was not successful in getting them all uniform. I think, yeah, I can do 4 at a time. And I have I guess I said I have it set quite low, and it's supposed to be 10 minutes on each side. So I will check quite frequently on the first side here. I don't want them to get too dark on the bottom, but I'll bring you back when it's time to turn them. Well, it's been 10 minutes, and I don't know if it shows up, how well it shows up, but it certainly made them much thicker. And that's a good color on the back. That's pretty much what you see on the bottom one. Well, not quite so much on one side. So. Stuck my finger on the pan. The pan is hot. I think what I was talking about a minute or two ago there was the difference in different stoves. So mine is a propane gas range, and as I said, I'm running it really next to its lowest flame. Propane isn't as hot as natural gas or butane, so you know, whatever you're using for a stove, an electric stove, you just have to experiment with it. I think it's most important not to go too hot. If you're a little too cool, you can always leave them longer or bring the heat up a little bit, but if you've gone too hot, you'll scorch them. So that is the first batch turned. Gives you an idea what they look like. I'll show you the finished product when I get finished here. Well, I finished cooking them about an hour ago, so they've cooled enough now that they could be toasted, I guess. Something that I read many years ago, I think more than likely on a package of English muffins. If you do this, take a fork and go around the muffin, piercing it as you go, instead of cutting it in two with a knife. This way, when you separate it, pull it apart, you get a rougher edge in there, and it toasts better. If you slice it with a knife, you get a smooth edge, and it's very hard for that to take much of a toasting, much of a browning under the toaster. So there's the first one split in half. I'll meet you in the dining room once this is toasted and buttered and probably some jam. Well, I've already generously buttered it. Did they ever smell good toasting? Something I guess that I forgot to mention as well is these freeze very well. Take them out individually and pop them in the microwave for a few seconds to thaw them enough so you can separate them and toast them. But they freeze very well. Very nice. Crisp. I think that's the last bottle of my homemade plum jam from 2015. We have a good crop of plums. I've got to make more this year because I really like the plum jam. I'm talking with my mouth half full here, but thank you very much for watching. If you like English muffins and have never made your own, I suggest you give it a try. It's really quite easy to do, and of course, so much more tasty than the commercially made variety.